You are listening to the Cycling Podcast in association with Rapha, the fastest clothing in the world tour, the home of cycling with character. Ride and watch with Rapha in 2019 as they partner EF Education First and Canyon SRAM.
Hello, my name's Richard Moore. I'm with Daniel Friebe.
Hello, Richard.
And Lionel Birnie.
Hello, Richard.
Together again, chaps.
Making a habit of this.
Yeah, it's going to end next week, Lionel. Don't get too comfortable.
Until the Giro. We'll be reunited at the Giro opening weekend. Not far away now, is it?
Nope. I'll be going out in the advance party on the Thursday to get things ready for you chaps.
Really? You're going on the Thursday?
I think so, yeah. I think so.
Kept that quiet, didn't he?
Didn't invite us to go on the Thursday, did he, Richard?
No. Anyway, how are you both? Are you well?
Not too bad.
Daniel, you coming off a winning weekend?
Oh, I've been on a course this weekend. Golf course. Kaboom.
Did you...
yes.
How many watts did you hit on the golf course?
I brought home some silverware for the Cycling Podcast. Yeah. I won my father's annual golfing extravaganza. No.
Age category.
Excellent, well done.
In the 38 to 39 years age category.
Anyway, how are you, Lionel?
Very well.
And where are we, Lionel?
Very well. We're at the National Theatre, our old school central London venue. We're like itinerant players, aren't we? We've been to Vermuteria up in St Pancras area. Last few weeks we've been at Bar Italia in Soho. If we carry on moving this far south, we might make it for the start of the Giro in Bologna in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, we're just south of the Thames here. You're lucky I'm here, fellas, because I had a long and late journey back last night from Belgium. Lots of queuing at the Eurotunnel.
Really? It could have been worse.
Customs officers on strike.
It could have been worse. The Buffalo of Flanders, how was it?
It was great. Yeah, I was over I caught the end of the Women's World Tour race in Japan on Thursday. Friday was E3, or the E3 Bink Bank Classic as it's known now, and then a really thrilling Gent-Wevelgem on Sunday. So packed a lot into my 4 days in Flanders. And
you're back out for the Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix, no?
Indeed I am.
You are the cobbled king this spring.
And I'm also going to take in Scheldeprijs and Brabantse Pijl. Now, I spoke to a rider at the end of E3 whose favourite race is Brabantse Pijl. Can you guess who it is? We'll return to that. But have you got a news roundup for us, please, Lionel?
I have. Loads of racing going on, so we'll try and rattle through this. We'll start in Catalonia, the Tour of Catalonia, where Astana continued their general classification run of victories with Miguel Angel Lopez taking the overall honours there, ahead of Adam Yates, who was also second at Tirreno Adriatico a week and a half ago. Egan Bernal of Team Sky was third. A really competitive week's racing, and kind of a pattern emerging in these early stage races this spring.
Astana win.
An Astana win, Adam Yates, Egan Bernal. There are patterns forming as we head towards the Grand Tours, and the Tour of the Basque Country, or Itzulia, which is in between Flanders and Roubaix, will probably confirm this pattern. Some of the stages that caught the eye: Thomas de Gent with a trademark lone breakaway win on stage one. A couple of wins for Michael Matthews. Chris Froome crashed and lost 14 minutes on stage two. Adam Yates won a stage. Miguel Angel Lopez laid the foundations for his overall victory by winning a stage. And Bora Hansgrohe had a good week with stage wins for Max Schachmann, and on the final day, Davide Formolo. There were some crashes on the final day. Romain Bardet, most notably, crashed with around 40 kilometres to go on the Montjuic descent. Suspected fractured ribs for AG2R's leader. And really bad luck for Simon Geschke of CCC. He fractured his elbow in the Vuelta a Murcia 5-6 weeks ago, and had broken a collarbone in a crash in Catalonia. So he is back on the sidelines. The rest of the racing really has been focused on Belgium. Dylan Groenewegen won the 3 days of De Panne. Now a one-day race, of course, ahead of Fernando Gaviria and Elia Viviani. A couple of crashes there. We'll probably talk about this race in passing when we focus on Gent-Wevelgem, because they all kind of lead towards the Tour of Flanders, don't they? But Luke Durbridge is out of the rest of the cobbled classics. Mitchelton Scott rider crashed and confirmed fractured collarbone. Zdeněk Stybar won the E3 Binkbank Classic, beating Wout van Aert and Greg van Avermaet. That follows his victory at Omloop Het Nieuwsblad a few weeks ago, and continued Deceuninck-Quick Step's run of one-day victories in the World Tour. Quite remarkable run they've had, but they didn't take the honours at Gent-Wevelgem on Sunday. We'll talk about that, but Alexander Kristoff bagged the victory for UAE Team Emirates. Away from Belgium briefly, Rudy Barbier of Israel Cycling Academy won the Classique Loire Atlantique in France, and the following day Marc Sarraut, who'd been second at the Grand Prix d'Henin and second at the Classique Loire Atlantique, took the Grand Prix Cholet. In Italy at the Settimana Coppi e Bartoli, Mitchelton Scott won the team time trial to set up a top three for them overall. Lucas Hamilton, Damien Howson and Nick Schultz was the order there. And Mikel Landa, who's on his way back from that bad crash at San Sebastian Classic last August, also won a stage, so things beginning to look up for Movistar's Basque rider there. And the Women's World Tour races, both won by Kirsten Wild of the Netherlands. She won the 3 days of Bruges de Panne and then Gent-Wevelgem. Honourable mention to her WNT Rota teammate Lisa Brennauer, who was on immaculate lead-out duties for Kirsten Wild. That's it. Lots of racing, but the standout race of the week, I would say, was Gent-Wevelgem on Sunday, Rich.
The fastest clothing in the World Tour. The home of cycling with character. Ride and watch with Rapha in 2019 as they partner EF Education First and Canyon SRAM.
It's difficult. I can only speak from a male's perspective, but it's difficult for the modern male to feel confident when wearing spandex and or lycra. My name is Taylor Finney and I ride for EF Education First Pro Cycling Team. Therefore, your comfort and your confidence is essential when you're putting on your bicycle clothing. I will admit that this is the most comfortable and the most confident that I've felt. They are the best bib shorts in the world.
Well, thank you very much to our headline sponsor, Rapha. That was just Taylor Finney.
I thought Bill and Ted 3 wasn't out yet. I thought it was coming out in a few weeks.
Maybe this is the answer. Maybe I should just be wearing bib shorts the whole time to, help me with my
as a modern male
chronic confidence issues.
I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, a ringing endorsement there from Taylor Finney for the Rapha bib shorts. That was great. We'll hear more from Taylor Finney, I think, in a couple of weeks before Paris-Roubaix. More in that vein. Thank you to Rapha, our headline sponsor. The new Rapha shoe range includes the classic RCC version. That's the Rapha Cycling Club, which is exclusive to members of the RCC. Very beautiful shoe it is too, with full carbon fibre sole, with the incredibly thin and light no-slip hard-wearing rubber for moments off the bike, and the classic Rapha design with the double wall lacing. You should keep an eye out too for the latest EF Gone Racing film. There was one released last week from Milan-San Remo. Upcoming are Tour of Flanders and Tour of Flanders. The film crew will be making something with EF Education First at those races. Subscribe to Rapha Films on YouTube. You've been playing around with your Rapha custom tool, Lionel.
I have. I've designed the Watford football shirt in using Rapha's custom tool, and I put on Twitter if there are any Watford fans who'd like a Watford-styled Rapha cycling jersey to get in touch, and I think we've got enough to meet the minimum order requirements, so I'm going to get my order in with Rapha fairly soon.
We are also going to ask listeners to the Cycling Podcast to come up with a cycling podcast design. I mean, go for it. There will be some exciting prizes available to the best design. We'll confirm what those prizes are, but
don't forget, though, you can also get the full range of Pédaleur de Charme clothing, jerseys, T-shirts and a cap on the Rapha website, rapha.cc.
And Pédaleurs de Charme as well for the jerseys and the T-shirts. I gave a Pédaleur de Charme T-shirt, did you notice, to Michael Hepburn, who had got a lot of praise on social media for stopping and helping Zach Dempster, who had crashed, Israel Cycling Academy rider, who'd crashed and looked in a pretty bad way. Hepburn stopped, laid his bike against the wall and helped him. So
this was during the 3 days of Depana, wasn't it?
Nasty 3 days of
nasty
Depana.
crash. Yeah,
it was a nasty crash, and certainly the type of thing that deserves a Pédaleur de Charme award, and he was very pleased to get that. Didn't feel like he'd done anything exceptional, really, because Zach Dempster's a friend of his, and
that in itself is charming, isn't it?
Absolutely. So anyway, on to Gent-Wevelgem, which probably the pick of the races of the last week. It was a humdinger, wasn't it? I mean, we sort of Gent-Wevelgem. It used to be a midweek race, and it feels like its status has been growing. Its distance has also been growing, which is maybe a factor in it feeling just like a meatier dish than it used to be. Still a race that can finish in a bunch sprint, but the weather plays a part, the course plays a part, and certainly this. I mischievously suggested on Twitter that it could be the sixth monument. It was a joke. I don't think just because we see a great edition of a particular race, it automatically deserves to be included as a monument. But it was a great edition, wasn't it?
Yeah, you mentioned the distance. It's now 250 plus kilometres, where it used to be sandwiched between the Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix and was around 200 kilometres. I think the addition of the plug streets, the gravel sections, makes it visually more appealing than it did before. Not that has a great impact on the race. And there's always the chance that the wind might blow and break things up. But the race was full on right from the start, wasn't it? I mean, I don't know whether you saw any of that, but certainly what was being reported about how it broke up under very aggressive racing conditions early on took its toll in the end. And when you look at Alexander Kristoff, who was the strongest in the sprint by far, and then Velon posted his average power output for the day, 345 watts. I mean, that was such a figure that even Dan Lloyd was querying whether that was correct on Twitter or seeking clarification. That gives you an indication of just what a hard day it was. Not perhaps as hard to win as the Tour of Flanders, but a significant increase in workload compared to the previous two races last week.
And we'd always come to think of Kristoff as someone who thrived in difficult races. I think quite steady races, a high pace from the start, long races, and that's exactly what Sunday was. I mean, he's someone who never really kind of lets his team down. He's always there or thereabouts, but it's been a while since he's produced that kind of performance in that kind of company. But he's definitely a danger now for Tour of Flanders. I had doubts about him on the Tour of Flanders course before he won Flanders, and if you remember, then he was away with Nicky Terpstra and managed to drop him on the Paterberg. So he was, he's a stocky sort of guy, and sometimes looks even stockier than ever at the moment. But he can get up the climbs. I mean, interesting to hear your thoughts on whether Wevelgem is a better guide for Flanders than E3. Greg Van Avermaet at the weekend suggested it's not, and that E3 gives us a better idea of who's going to go well. I mean, the last few years there have been various riders who've done the double, the E3 Flanders double. Last year Terpstra did it, and Cancellara did it in 2013, Boonen did it in 2012. But Wevelgem is the longer race, isn't it? It's 250 kilometres.
And yesterday's, we're speaking on Monday, was a particularly sort of tough edition of it. And it was interesting because we went into that race with Deceuninck-Quick step on this incredible run of victories, and it was almost as if the other teams were just going out there to make it as hard as possible for them, because it was one of these races where unusually Deceuninck-Quick had one leader, and the big threat that they've posed in a lot of these races is having so many options. Gent-Wevelgem, Viviani went really close last year and was really upset by that, and it was one of his main goals for the year to go back and try to win that race. So it was a race where the Deceuninck-Quick game plan was very obvious to the other teams, and that maybe made it easier for them to take them on, to just disrupt that a little bit. And we saw, early doors, Peter Sagan was obviously in that move with some Bora Hansgrohe support, but Trek, Segafredo and Jumbo-Visma were also there in big numbers too, and so it did look like the other teams were really taking the fight to them.
Yeah, and it forced Deceuninck-Quick to do a lot of work in the chase, didn't it? First with Tim de Klerk, and then there was this kind of jostling. Who are they saving? Because Steniek-Stibar did a lot of work, and Philippe Gilbert was kind of saved until quite late on. Clearly, they had everything in for Elia Viviani, but having missed the break, the responsibility fell squarely on them to bring it all back together. So it left Viviani to freelance it in the sprint, and we shouldn't overlook the way that UAE Team Emirates played that, because they had Kristoff and Gaviria. Gaviria, who was second in Depana a few days before, but in his interview afterwards, Kristoff said that Gaviria had told him with around 10 kilometres to go, I'm not feeling so good, so you go for it. Viviani, of course, was on Gaviria's wheel, and Gaviria did the perfect teammate job of pretty much shutting the door on Viviani and boxing him in by letting a little gap open at around about the time that Kristoff took his flyer. So it was a well thought out win by Kristoff, because of course he was off the front of the main group. We were speculating whether or not he was trying to bridge up to the
let's
Peter
hear,
Sagan
shall we,
group.
from Allan Peiper, the team boss at UAE Team Emirates. He used to be at BMC for many years. Of course, he moved over the winter. The Australian former rider, and I spoke to him at the finish about Kristoff's win and how it had come about.
Well, you must be delighted with that. A finish that suited Kristoff, I suppose. A strong man's finish, wasn't it? A strong man's race.
Yeah, but it was a really hard race. 150 k's in the first 3 hours. That's like 50 average. It's not that difficult to work out, but it was a very, very hard race. We had two riders left over: Fernando, who was in the initial break of 15, and Alex, who was behind. I think he really did well to anticipate the second time up the Kemmel, get out in front before those big attacks came on the Kemmel and save his energy a little bit. And I've got to say, hats off to Fernando, who came up in the final even though he was dead, and tried to give Alex another hand. And Alex is good after 250 k's. He loses nothing, so we saw that in the sprint as well.
So you think that going out the way he did to try and bridge across leaders actually helped him in the end?
Oh, for sure. It wasn't just so much about bridging across to the leaders, it was getting out in front. For when guys like Stibar and Van Aert attacked on the climb, he can't answer that. And I think he anticipated that really well, because that can break a lot of guys' legs. He got out in front, they caught him after the climb, came back together again, but it unfolded in the end, luckily for us, because we had no helpers apart from the two sprinters, so we just had to gamble on a sprint finish.
So that was Allan Peiper. Interesting, when we saw Kristoff it looked like he was trying to bridge across to the 5 leaders, because that big 18-man group, it splintered and they were caught, weren't they? And then 4 of that group went clear: Sagan, Mike Turnison, Edward Toynes and Matteo Trentin, and that was a very strong kind of quartet. And it didn't look like there was a well-organised chase behind, though there were 3 or 4 quick-step riders at that moment there. But it looked like they were waiting a little bit before they committed, because they didn't have the numbers they needed. And the 7-man teams might be a factor in this as well, and the difficulty on a course like that of keeping things together. But Luke Rowe, who'd been in the original move, chose that moment to go and try and bridge across, which looked like a strange thing to do. He made it. Then Kristoff went as well, and we thought he was trying to do the same thing, but Peiper suggesting there that actually he was just trying to get ahead before the second and final ascent of the Kemmelberg.
Well, you mentioned 7-man teams, Rich, and I think in a 250-kilometre race, which is hotly contested from kilometre zero, that's when you really see it. The teams are going to get completely blown away if they have to use men in the first couple of hours. And we talked about it in Milan-San Remo. Over that distance, 250 kilometres plus, you are vulnerable. And Quick-Step are going to be, Deceuninck are going to be vulnerable in Flanders by virtue of the fact that everyone is going to be watching them, and they've got a lot of kind of attackers in there. They've got a lot of guys who are there to try to win the race, and not just as workhorses.
What did you make of Peter Sagan being in that group? Because he's won Gent-Wevelgem a couple of times.
4 times.
4 times, of course, yeah. Doesn't need to win it again, does he? Really, I mean, it's not like, it'd be nice, obviously, but his form hasn't been fantastic. He's been a little bit ill before Milan-San Remo, who was kind of visible in Milan-San Remo, and then up the road, working hard in this break. I wonder, he wouldn't be, I thought, probably looking ahead at the Tour of Flanders, trying to get some hard work under his wheels before the Tour of Flanders, rather more so than thinking that was a great bet of a group to go all the way to the finish.
Fact, corrections corner, he's won it 3 times, sorry. He was going for his 4th win, of course, in Gent-Wevelgem. I thought that, because on E3 he did what he's done before in E3. Do you remember there was a year at E3 where he just blew up and seemed to run out of energy? I can't remember what year that was. Maybe
was that not the year that Kwiatkowski won 2016?
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. And so, and that is a shorter race, and so you're quite surprised to see that. But then it depends what sort of efforts you're making. And I think it looked to me like Gent-Wevelgem was, he was like blowing out the cobwebs, if there are cobwebs. He was, we've seen Kristoff's figures for the day. Apparently Degenkolb averaged 330 watts. He was also in that move. But Sagan's, efforts over the course of the day must have been off the charts as well, because he was in that first move, he was doing a lot of work in it as well. It didn't look to me like he was riding in a way where winning was the number one priority. And then when he went with that second move, again, he was working very hard in it. So, I don't think there's anything wrong with his condition based on the amount of work that he did over the course of the day. And it could just be that he's going to come to the boil a little bit later, which is what we've suspected, isn't it?
Find that top end with a week to go.
And even further, he's going to Liège-Bastogne-Liège as well. So, he's got another 4 weeks, 5 weeks to try and be in or find winning form. He's got Paris-Roubaix title to defend. So, I think there aren't many riders who could make the sort of efforts that he made. I mean, Trentin impressed me a lot as well. Again, we question his tactics at Milan-San Remo, but the condition is extraordinary, and he's an outsider for Flanders as well, I would have thought. Another rider who rode very well at Gent-Wevelgem, having had a terrible time at E3, was Luke Rowe from Team Sky. And he said a very interesting thing afterwards, where he was talking about, I was asking whether the adjustment back to the small cobbled roads of Belgium was difficult, because we saw him ride so well at Paris-Nice recently. He said the thing that's most difficult is actually adjusting from being a team helper to a team leader, and going from riding very selflessly to riding very selfishly. He finds that quite a difficult adjustment to make. You'll hear a slightly longer interview than the one we're about to hear in a new Friends special, which we've just released today. I think we went in the end for Tour of Flanders 9, Team Sky 0, and it's a look at a curious statistic where Team Sky have, for all their successes, they've never really produced a result at Tour of Flanders. 3 top 10s in 9 editions, no podiums, and only 2 riders ever in the top 10, Geraint Thomas and Luke Rowe. So it's a study really of Team Sky's performance in that race, and why, asking the question, why is the Tour of Flanders such a difficult race? We discuss that. We also hear from Rod Ellingworth, Servus Canavan, Patrick Lefevre, Matt Heyman, Juan Antonio Fletcher and Luke Rowe. But we'll hear a little bit from that interview with Luke Rowe here. E3, you're obviously disappointed after the race. Was it important today just to do something to, as you said, get your confidence and give yourself a bit of a boost going into Flanders?
Yeah, it was important just to bounce back in some way or another. Like I said, we've done E3 and Wevelgem now, and we still haven't got a result, but just to be in the thick of it, that early crosswind, be in the front echelon and be in the moves towards the end, it's good for morale, and it's important to at least have one performance like that before the big 2. I felt confident all day, felt strong all day, and that's of course the result is the most important thing, but it's also it's a nice feeling to be able to ride the bike and feel good.
I mean, we saw how strong you were at Paris-Nice. Is it, when you come back to these races and these roads, is it a case of sort of finding that rhythm again? Can that be quite a difficult adjustment?
I don't think finding the rhythm is difficult, but one adjustment that is a bit tricky is up until now I haven't ridden for myself once, and it's been riding for others and putting yourself in the wind to protect the other guys, which is kind of my 9 to 5 day job, and then on the weekends you get to have a party and ride for yourself. That's how it kind of feels. So it's just kind of changing that mentality, which also has an effect on the way you ride in the peloton. As opposed to thinking of others, you've got to kind of be selfish and look after yourself. That's the only change I feel.
So Luke Rowe there, and if you want to hear that new Friends special, become a friend of the podcast at thecyclingpodcast.com. Thanks everyone who already is a friend of the podcast.
What else did we learn from Gent-Wevelgem in particular about the Tour of Flanders? I thought Nicky Terpstra looked good in unfamiliar colours. Obviously, no longer part of the Quick Step Blue. He's riding for Direct Energy.
Have you been following Nicky Terpstra's cultural acclimatisation at Direct Energy on their videos that they put out on YouTube? It's a bit like, have you ever seen the film Elf? It's a bit like that. It's a bit like someone having crawled out of a Santa sack and having to live as a human being, having grown up as an elf.
You mean he's struggling to adapt from Dutch to French?
Yes,
Can he
not linguistically, but from a fairly raucous. I always got the impression, still get the impression, a fairly raucous environment on the Deceuninck, and a happy-go-lucky kind of atmosphere on the Deceuninck-Quick Step team bus to an altogether more sort of downbeat.
I'm thinking he could just turn the Dutch flag on its side. Voila.
Yeah,
voila. It is interesting though, isn't it? I mean, a lot of riders have left Quick Step, and then I'm thinking Marcel Kittel and others have then not really produced the goods, whereas Terpstra just looks like the rider he was at Quick Step, and they have got quite a good team. He's dragged the team up with him, hasn't he?
Yeah, and they have got Adrien Petit, I think was 5th in Wevelgem, and is very competent on the in the cobbled classics. Gaudin is always very prominent in these races, and one result would make the spring for them, wouldn't it? So I definitely wouldn't write Terpstra off. He's got 2 big shots left at Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix, and I think he's very much contender for either of them.
Yeah, he went with about 15 kilometres to go on Sunday at the run into Wevelgem. A very difficult run in that, because it's pretty much one road, isn't it, straight the way into the outskirts of town. Then there was the move with Jasper Stuyven and Sebastian Langeveld, Jack Bauer, and the Jumbo-Visma rider who, Rich, you said they impressed you, but they were there in numbers, weren't they? It was Grøndal Janssen in that final move, and for a while that looked like it might go to the finish, but that put Deceuninck-Quick Step under quite a bit of pressure. They had to really turn the pace on, and that in turn meant that Viviani was left to his own devices. So in a way that helped Kristoff in the final, in the finish.
And you're asking what else did we learn? I think confirmation that Oliver Nassen is in tremendous form, and maybe doesn't have the sort of team support, but with Flanders being that much harder and more selective, I think he's a real threat, because he's a fast finisher as well. And we were talking a lot in our Team Sky special we've just released about the importance of having a fast rider, to win these races.
I think for many years he'd written himself off as a finisher, as a sprinter, and had got it into his head that he couldn't sprint. And I think he found himself in a position to have to try a couple of times this spring, and has realised that he's a lot quicker than he sort of remembered or thought. He talked after Gent-Wevelgem about how he's just growing in confidence in his finish, and now he's quite willing to wait in a group like he was in at Gent-Wevelgem and think that he's got a chance. And third in, where was he? Third last week somewhere.
Milan-San Remo.
Milan-San Remo. And third in Gent-Wevelgem. So and I think we've talked about it many times. When riders go into one-day races, big one-day races, with that confidence and with that willingness and ability to wait, then it makes them doubly dangerous.
Chute à l'arrière du peloton, cycling podcast team car at the back of the pack, please.
That's the voice of Seb Piquet, race radio at the Tour de France, to remind us to tell you that this week's episode is sponsored by The Economist, which is about far more than just economics and finance. It covers a range of subjects from politics and business to science, technology, the arts and the environment. And if you want to get a free copy of The Economist sent to your door, you can text the word cycling to 78070. The Economist is a smart guide to the forces changing your world. Richard, what have you read this week that may potentially change our world?
Well, an article that touches on something we talked about last week, Lionel, about sponsorship. In this case, sponsorship of the arts. It's an article headlined Culture Vultures, and it argues that the case for returning stolen art is strong, for refusing tainted donations less so. The stuff about returning stolen art concerns museums, art galleries and so on, but the bits about refusing tainted donations really interests me, because it has a sort of link to professional cycling as well, and discussion that we're increasingly having about what, who's an appropriate sponsor of professional cycling teams. Now, this concerns the story that I mentioned last week about the Sackler family in the US who developed the opioid OxyContin and are blamed by some for the opioid epidemic in America in particular. And a lot of cultural institutions are now refusing their cash. And the Economist makes a very interesting argument, I think. It says the campaigns against tainted philanthropy are weak. If money was legally earned, museums should, in most cases, feel free to accept it. Does it benefit humanity more to return a sack of cash to the Sacklers or to spend it on bringing culture to multitudes? Those who decry the laundering of corporate reputations through charity forget something. It does not work well. And this connects, as I said, to a conversation we've been having about companies or even states using sport to greenwash their reputations. And the key question maybe should be, does it actually work, or does it highlight some of the misgivings that people have about those companies or states?
Yeah, it's actually shining more of a light on the issues and bringing them to light to an audience that may not have previously been exposed to those arguments.
As the article finishes, people give to museums, or we could argue sports teams or events, in the hope that they will be remembered well. All they really achieve is to be remembered.
Well, it's the old, is there any such thing as bad publicity argument, isn't it? Well, there we are. Well, if you'd like to get a copy of The Economist sent to your house, text the word cycling to 78070. That's cycling to 78070.
So inevitably we're looking ahead to Flanders. We haven't talked a lot about E3, but as you said, Lionel, E3 and Gent-Wevelgem they both offer pointers. The big question, I suppose, is about Deceuninck-Quick and what they do. And something we were talking about before we started recording was Yves Lampaert, who's looked really strong and good, but has not been let off the leash. He's been very much sort of constrained into a sort of domestique role, and we've seen a lot of him in his Belgian champions jersey, but he's certainly not been a protected rider so far. And I just wonder if this is all, if there's going to be a sort of major payback for him in one of these two races coming up, Flanders or Roubaix.
Well, there's an embarrassment of riches for Deceuninck, isn't there? You just wonder, how they approach like a race like Sunday's race, like the Tour of Flanders. To what extent you can have a game plan, and how sort of dynamic you have to be in the ability to sort of change that game plan as things go along. I mean, what would you do with, how would you shuffle your pack of Lampaert, Gilbert, Jungels, Stibar?
Oh, Jungels. I mean, almost forgot about Jungels, but almost won E3 as well, didn't he? An incredible ride by him. I think the strength is the options, as opposed to at Gent-Wevelgem where they only had really one plan there, and that makes it kind of easy for other teams to destroy it or spoil it. At Tour of Flanders, how do you take that on? I was looking at in researching the episode we've just done on Sky's Flanders failure. Deceuninck-Quick have won Flanders 3 times in the last 10 years. They've had 18 riders in the top 10. It's pretty much 2 a year in the top 10. And if you're placing 2 riders in the top 10, you're giving yourself a really good chance of winning the race.
Yeah, but you would expect that from the riders that they've got. If you look at their 7, take Tim de Klerk out because he's going to be the workhorse, we assume. They've probably got 5 riders who could finish on the podium. And from the start of the year, the training camp and press launch they had in Spain, where I spoke to Yves Lampaert about these races, he's won Tour of Flanders in the last 2 years. That's coming up, of course, between where we're speaking on Monday and the Tour of Flanders on Sunday. If Lampaert is out trying to win that will give you a clue as to whether or not he's going to be protected on Sunday. My suspicion is that he won't be prominent in that race, may not ride it perhaps, who knows, but I would have thought that Jungels, Gilbert and Lampaert cover all the bases with Stibar as a kind of because of his results, somebody who can go maybe a bit further out. But the luxury they have is that they can put somebody in every move going. If if they want to. I mean, any of them could finish it off.
The big question is, I mean, how many Deceuninck-Quick Step riders are there in Daniel's list of the 18 riders
on the list? So
most
18
likely to win Flanders?
Most likely riders to win Tour of Flanders in descending order: Stibar, Narsen, Van Avermaet, Van Aert, Jungels, Kristoff, Trentin, Sagan, Lamparts, Terpstra, Gilbert, Van der Poel, Langeveld, Pedersen, Craig Anderson, Mohoric, Benoot, Stuyven. Any notable omissions, chaps?
Oh goodness,
Degenkolb's not there.
Niels
he
Pollitt
didn't make the cut. Pollitt didn't make the cut. He was probably number 19 or 20.
Was Kristoff in there?
Yeah,
Bettiol wasn't there either.
Bettiol.
Just because...
Sepp Van Mark, was he there?
Sepp Van Mark was not there, but I was under the impression that he wasn't going to be fit for
He's going to be
Flanders.
okay to ride. He crashed at E3, looked quite badly hurt, but he landed in a ditch. He's okay for Flanders.
Another one who's conspicuous through his absence, Valgren, simply because we've not seen a lot of him and he seems to be struggling for form.
Yeah, that's a curious one. Went to Dimension Data off the back of a great season at Astana.
Boassenhagen also has been very quiet, hasn't he, so far?
The interesting thing, I mentioned last week the chat I had with Juan Antonio Flecha for the special that's just come out, and he was talking about his time at Team Sky, that Boassenhagen was supposed to be developed into a classic specialist. He said he couldn't ride on the cobbles. I mean, he said he was terrible on the cobbles. So he's a big, strong rider. But he said the best rider he ever saw ride on the cobbles was Geraint Thomas. He said from the minute he rode with him, he just floated across them. Whereas Boassenhagen, and he won Gent-Wevelgem, didn't he, many years ago now. And a lot of people expecting him just because he's in the mould of a classics rider. But Fletcher said that he had real difficulties riding on the cobbles.
No Sky Riders in there. Rich, will I rue that?
Will you row that? Well, I think the difficulty, and we touch on it in the special, which I keep mentioning because you really should sign up and listen to it. But the problem is the lack of a fast finisher, isn't there?
Exactly.
And the numbers. I mean, they have got, they had a shocker at E3 where Owain Doull was supposed to go at one point in the race. Moscon was there. Now, Moscon is a curious one because we expected better from him, I think, in these races. I was asking Rod Ellingworth about him. He said he's really struggling after a crash that he had at the Tour of, in the Middle East, the UAE Tour, was it? Is that what it was called? I can't even remember now. It seems so long ago. He had a bad crash there and didn't recover from that. Went to Strade Bianche, really struggled there and should have missed that race. Went to Tirreno and was still... he apparently struggles after crashes to recover, and he's just not... He's miles away from where he should be. I was, hanging around the Team Sky bus after Gent-Wevelgem, and there was a pretty downbeat atmosphere, it seemed to me. Luke Rowe was pleased, but again, there was no result to speak of. There was no top 10 or anything that they could really hang on to. So seeing them producing a winner at Tour of Flanders, it looks very much a long shot.
And Kwiatkowski's not due to ride.
Doesn't look like it. He's not been riding any of these races, but yeah, I mean, he's somebody who you think has got a good Tour of Flanders in him at some point.
So it's going to come down to the big guns, isn't it? Surely Deceuninck-Quick Steps, they can pluck somebody from their embarrassment of riches. Peter Sagan, Greg Van Avermaet, who we've not talked a lot about, but he was up there in the Finnish group in E3 Bink Bonk Classic Harelbeke.
Pink Bank.
Bink.
I prefer Bink Bonk.
Bink Bonk. The Bink Bank Classic. Oh, heavens. He was up there. Again, I get criticised every time I say this, but his Achilles heel is from small groups or large groups. He doesn't seem to have that. He's not the fast finisher. There's always somebody a bit faster, so he may have to...
should be very fast. I mean, he's a guy who's got decent pedigree, even in going back to the start of his career, even in bunch sprints. But I've been surprised. I was surprised that he lost to Stibar in E3. And my big concern with Van Avermaet has been his team. He was isolated in the group. Gent-Wevelgem, there was no one in sight, and that's been a theme throughout the season so far. Slightly worrying. And Rich, I think you mentioned Allan Peiper earlier. There've been a couple of director sportif changes that we've not mentioned or have probably gone or passed unnoticed this year, but I just wonder how much Dirk de Mol not being in the car at Trek Segafredo is affecting them, and Allan Peiper likewise not being in what was BMC is now the CCC car.
Well, the de Mol not having too much of an effect at Katusha,
seemingly not
either.
To be fair, I thought Trek did all right at Gent-Wevelgem. They did well. Oh, you're saying that because they've lost him,
they've lost Dirk de Mol.
Yeah.
They're doing better now.
No,
is that what you're saying?
No, they have been struggling.
They have been struggling.
Oh, right. I thought they did well. They did well. Degenkolb was up the road and then obviously second in the sprint. Stuyven and Mads Pedersen were both in the last 20-30 kilometres. Were riding
got a good
well.
lineup. There's no doubt about that.
Maybe. I mean, I think them and Bahrain Merida as well. I mean, Mohoric was looking good in Gent-Wevelgem.
It looks really good, but seems to make his efforts at all the wrong points. I mean, he looks really strong. It's the first time he's ridden these races. I think he will learn, but it looks to me like he's firing his bullets at the wrong times.
And just on the local knowledge and the game plan, we talked earlier about Deceuninck-Quick Step's game plan, and there's a whole sort of mythology as well as the mythology around Tour of Flanders in general, around how some of the teams and some of the directors have come up with game plans over the years. We mentioned Dirk de Mol. His old sort of Yoda figure, the sage that he has always consulted on the eve of the Tour of Flanders was a guy called Jeff Brackevelt, who used to be the Lotto team manager, and Dirk de Mol has had a tradition over the years whereby he would go to Jeff Brackevelt's house every day or every eve of the Tour of Flanders, and he would thrash out the game plan. He would leave Jeff Brackevelt's house with this sort of fully formed plan that he would hope to put into action the following day. And Jeff Brackevelt unfortunately died recently. I think he was in his 80s, but he was a real sort of sage of Belgian cycling. So I wonder who's going to fill that void for de Mol and Katusha now.
Well, you mentioned another rider, Alberto Bettiol, earlier. He rode very well at the E3 Bink Bonk Classic, as it shall now be known. He was fourth in the end, but an impressive rider. Didn't see a lot of him last year when he moved to BMC and had a bad crash, but he showed in glimpses when he was at Cannondale previously that he's a talented rider for these difficult uphilly finishes.
And I'm going to be very, very kind to Jonathan Waters by saying that, very euphemistically saying that Jonathan Waters was not quite convinced about Alberto Bettiol when he turned professional. I remember Bettiol having a terrible, terrible time in his first season, barely finishing races, and I suggested to Jonathan Waters that possibly he might struggle to have a successful career as a professional cyclist. And I think Jonathan Waters agreed with me fairly forcibly.
Was he one of the Italians that they sort of inherited? Another one, Davide Formolo, rode very well at Catalunya. We'll be talking about that in a moment. But yeah, Bettiol was in the break at the Tour de France the day that I was in the Cannondale team car a couple of years ago. And one of the interesting things in that, he was in a big break and he kept coming back to team car because he was desperate to answer a call of nature, and he didn't have the skills to do that on the move, and this was causing him real discomfort. Eventually he did stop and he got back on, but the team were not too happy with him because he stopped just before they started climbing. Anyway, it was quite entertaining. That was a French special as well, that episode. Could Bettiol be the new Michele Bartoli? He's a similar sort of build actually, kind of, and
also Tuscan.
Well, let's hear Alberto Bettiol. He caught my eye at Milan San Remo, obviously, for his attack on the Poggio, and then with fourth at the E3 Bink Bonk Classic. That was a very strong ride we saw from you today. Are you pleased fourth in the end? Are you pleased, or are you a bit disappointed to miss out on the podium?
Yes, I'm really disappointed because I think the team played really well. We were in three before the patter, and then we split up, but we were still on the game with me and Sebastian Langeveld in the back. I only had to follow Stibar in the final. I followed him when he attacked alone, and then I had also to follow him on the sprint. But in the last K, Van Aert really smart take his wheel, and unfortunately I had to let him pass. And in the end, I tried to sprint, but they anticipate and they close me on the left. The sprint is another story. Let's say I have to enter yet in the Belgium mode, a little bit more aggressive. And especially in the days like this where it's really nice and fresh to ride. Everybody were super fresh, super ready and nervous all day. So in the end was a really hard stage, hard.
But you're clearly, we saw you in Milan-San Remo as well last week. One of the you helped to sort of animate the race and set up the final move. You're obviously in great form. Are you feeling like you're in really good form?
Yeah. Fortunately I am in this great form because this let me stay with the best rider here, and even if I'm a little bit far back, in the kick I always pass a lot of guys, but this in the end cost me a lot of energy, and for example today I can't sprint really well because I was really tired, so I have to improve this. I know it's my limit, but with this form, sooner or later, maybe a victory can come.
And are these the races you like? The Flanders races, Tour of Flanders. Is that a race that you're looking forward to now as well?
Yeah, I mean, now I'm here and I race also Flanders to try to perform well and to make another good result like this one. Harelbeke is not that far from Flanders, it's only 50-60 k shorter, but in the end we are all the same riders, the same moor, the same berg. So yeah, we will see. I still have 10 days to focus on the Flanders. And we will see also Sepp how he's going after the crash. I think he's pretty good. I heard now in the bus. So yeah, we are happy. We stay focused on the goal to try to perform as well as we can.
The Cycling Podcast is supported by Science in Sport. Science in Sport, fueled by science.
Thank you very much indeed to Science and Sport for sponsoring the Cycling Podcast. You can still get 25% off all your Science and Sport products at scienceandsport.com with the code SISCP25. That's SISCP25. This week's question for the Science and Sport experts comes from Larry Grossman from Washington, D.C. Larry has been quite a frequent correspondent. I've actually met Larry when he's been in London. He looked me up and we went for a coffee. So thanks for your question, Larry. He writes, because of the podcast, I learned of Science and Sport. That's what we like to hear. And I've been buying their products using the discount code for listeners. They sent me for free 500 grams of their Rego Rapid Recovery Shake formula. I had a terrible allergic reaction. It was my fault. I never bothered to look, but it was soy-based, which I'm allergic to. What does Science and Sport recommend to those of us who have allergies to soy or other raw proteins, such as peanuts, almonds, etc.? Is there anything they offer or can recommend? Would a simple whey-based shake with some additions work the same? That's from Larry Grossman. Over to you, Ben Samuels.
Hi Larry. I'd actually look at this one as two nutrients that we need to hit at the same time, and they're both key in post-exercise recovery. Those would be protein and carbohydrate. With the dietary restrictions you've got around using soy, having a whey-based shake as an alternative is a really good approach. That's going to provide the protein feeding. You could then mix that with around 300 ml of skimmed milk to provide carbohydrates, vitamins and minerals. The milk's also going to provide an additional protein source. And finally, you could have that alongside a piece of fruit for some additional carbs and micronutrients. You don't necessarily have to eat the fruit separately. It could be all blended into the same post-exercise shake if you're feeling adventurous with the blender. If you go down that route, you might need some additional water or ice just to get that consistency right.
Thanks for that, Ben, and thanks, Larry, for the question. If you have a question for Science and Sport, please email us, contact@thecyclingpodcast.com, or you can leave us a WhatsApp voice message. The number is +44 7971 338 205. That's +44 7971 338 205. Leave us any questions about your own sports nutrition, or if you have a question about what the pros use, send them in. Anything else, Lionel, from Tour of Flanders? I think you had one thing to add.
Well, the much anticipated debut of world champion Alexander Alejandro Valverde in the Tour of Flanders. We are anticipating him being on the start line on Sunday. He's never ridden the Tour of Flanders before, dipped his toe in the water with Dwars door Vlaanderen last year, has been talking all spring about wanting to make his debut at the Tour of Flanders. He'll be 3 weeks shy of his 39th birthday. What do you reckon? Any chance?
He's also announced his retirement, Valverde.
But not just yet.
Not imminent. But he is going to retire at some point.
At the end of...
took me by surprise.
At the end of 2020 or 2021?
2021.
So he's going to carry on. Yeah, so he's going to carry on till he's 41. Hope for you yet, Daniel.
I wonder, though, if we're seeing... I mean, he didn't make Daniel's list of 18, so he's going to finish 19th, I would suggest. But I wonder if we're seeing the first signs of the fading of the Valverde force, because, well, he hasn't been quite as consistent or as dangerous as he's looked so consistently for so long.
Hang on, I mean, it's seventh at Milan-San Remo, 10th in the Tour of Catalonia.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
these are just slight. It's evidence of a slight decline, and the thing about Valverde has been his consistency. He's always been
10th at Catalonia, 7th at San Remo, 2nd in the UAE Tour, 2nd in the Vuelta a Murcia, 3rd in
So guys, I'm just thinking Valverde looks as good as ever, doesn't he? I mean, he looks as sharp as ever. It's incredible.
It would be really interesting to see how he goes, because he'll know all the wheels to follow, and the kind of the thing about local knowledge, if you like, almost in his case doesn't apply, because he can just. Well, I mean, you could.
He's a good cyclist.
He is a good cyclist. You could have a bike race on the moon, and he'd probably be
the favourite. Wouldn't he?
He would, yeah. I mean, how he'd cope with zero gravity, I don't know, but I mean, maybe there's some Rapha shoes that can help with that.
We saw with Nibali last year, didn't we? We saw, a rider with that much racecraft and a good bike handler, and someone who's also, with Valverde, he's going to be up for it. He's not going to shy away from the sort of the rough and tumble of it. So he might surprise us. I don't think he'll win the race, but he might be in the shake-up with 30k to go.
Talk of Valverde does segue neatly into Catalonia. What did you make of? What did we learn from Catalonia? I mean, you're talking about patterns. Lionel, what do we make of the Yates twins? And I'm really curious about how they're both sort of approaching their big targets. Adam Yates going for the Tour, Simon Yates going for the Giro, and it looks almost like Simon Yates is doesn't feel the need to test himself in the same way that Adam does in these stage races. That he's going there with quite specific targets rather than going for the overall.
It looks like that, Rich. It looked like that to a certain extent in Paris-Nice as well. I know Simon Yates lost some time in the crosswinds, and that sort of conditioned his overall challenge. But he looks as though he's training, and Adam looks as though he's competing every day in stage races. And I wonder how much Adam feels that he's got a point to prove. And we always hear from them that there is no real rivalry between them, but Simon had such success last year. Adam also had a successful season, but he's missed out at the Tour de France, partly through bad luck, partly because he made a mistake in the stage that he should have won in the Pyrenees. And it may be that this is his year.
Well, he's 15 seconds separate him from back-to-back World Tour stage race wins, beaten by the narrowest of margins by Primož Roglič at Tirreno Adriatico, in the hunt and really trying to win it on the last day in Catalonia. It's always a punchy old race, isn't it, Catalonia? And then the Basque Country kind of takes it on another level, and then practically we're into the Grand Tour. So it's interesting. You see the top riders are, as I say, the patterns are forming, aren't they? We're seeing Bernal, Quintana, Lopez, Yates. The names are the same at the top of the GC, and they're all kind
Roglič.
Not there this week, but already off the mark with big victories. So,
and I mean, you're right. The other talking point from Catalonia was probably Chris Froome. Had a crash, but looked well off the pace. We've seen him off the pace at Catalonia before, but I just wonder about Chris Froome, and I've heard one or two little whispers that there is concern about his condition, and it's not through, I don't believe, undertraining. It could be through overtraining, and some questions already about whether he's going to be in the right shape to try and win a 5th Tour de France. Some reports at the weekend that Egan Bernal may ride the Tour de France. That assumes that he will, as planned, ride the Giro. A significant change in the last few weeks has been that Team Sky have a new sponsor and long-term backing, and that may change the equation for them, whether Bernal even goes to the Giro after all. If Team Sky, we know how they operate, if they look at their riders they have and decide that of the 3 potential Grand Tour winners, Geraint Thomas, Egan Bernal and Chris Froome, the Tour de France is the most important race for them. If they look at those 3 and decide that of the 3, Bernal has the best chance of winning the Tour de France, I think he will miss the Giro and go to the Tour de France. I think that's how they work, isn't it? We've seen it before. We've seen when Bradley Wiggins was defending champion at the Tour de France, they looked at it and said Chris Froome has a better chance of winning this year. He went, Bradley Wiggins didn't.
Very true. What would they do for the Giro then, or is it a lesser objective? And so
I think it'll be a lesser objective, won't it? Because it's no longer a race that they need as a shop window for a potential new sponsor.
That's a very good point. Yes, imagine if Ineos hadn't come in, the team would be under the weight of speculation about whether they're continuing, on what basis they're continuing, whether the budget would be secure. As we understand it, the budget is bigger with Ineos than with Sky. So all of a sudden, the Giro, as you say, is no longer...
This is speculation. Nicolas Portal said at the weekend that definitively Bernal will go to the Giro, and that a decision will then be made about whether he goes to the Tour. But if over the next few weeks, I think if there are real concerns about Froome's conditioning, Geraint Thomas as well hasn't had the best build-up. He's had to cut short an altitude camp at Tenerife because it's snowing there. These things, and Froome crashing and being maybe not in the shape that he should be at this time of the year. We're not that far from... We're still a distance away from the Tour, but we're not that far from a point where decisions will be made, I guess.
So what about Miguel Angel Lopez then?
Superman.
It's Superman. It's an English...
Superman. Superman.
This time last year, he was sort of on the way up, had some good results, not as spectacular as this spring's results, and we were talking about him by the time the Giro came round as a potential winner. He finished 3rd there, of course, 3rd again at the Vuelta in the late summer. Is he riding himself into a position where he might again be the favourite for the Giro before the start?
He's obviously not addressed his weakness, or is unable to address his weakness in time trialling, and I think if you look at the amount of time trialling there is in the Giro course, he will struggle on that score. But I see him as being very dangerous because he's still unpredictable. He's still willing to ride a very aggressive race. He was bailed out a little bit in Catalonia on the final stage by his teammate André Zeitz, but that obviously is part of trying to win a Grand Tour, having a strong team, and there's no doubt that Astana are incredibly strong, have been incredibly strong throughout the year. And I also thought that Superman he looked as though he stayed pretty calm and cool and took good decisions. Yesterday when Adam Yates and Simon Yates were down the road, there was a point at which on the final lap of the circuit, Zeitz was tiring and Yates still had a gap of about 25 seconds, and Superman had to take things into his own hands, and he did that. And I remember speaking to the people at Astana at the Giro last year, and they still felt that as a leader he wasn't necessarily taking the best decisions. He wasn't able to impose himself, but he's had a lot of experience over the last 12 months of leading the team, and I imagine there's been a lot of progress on that score, so he'll be very dangerous.
Are we going to have to call him the pronunciation police for the word Superman at some point?
It sounds like it.
We had a drink with Rob Hatch, Chief Inspector of the pronunciation police, last week, when he pronounced Bermondsey, the place in southeast London, as Bermondsey. I mean, and I didn't ridicule him or say he was...
you did, Lionel. In fact,
no,
that's what you're doing now. to a much bigger audience than he had at the time. But anyway.
Well,
poor old Rob.
If you...
I mean, yeah.
Anyway.
The pronunciation is usually impeccable. There's a minor slip. We're all capable of them. Anyway, should we leave it there, chaps? God, we'll be back next week to talk about the Tour of Flanders.
You'll be coming from Belgium, no?
Well, I'll be still there, actually, so I'll have to do it remotely. But
that's what I mean.
I'll be coming from... Oh, I see what you mean. See what you did there. We've got a lot of other things to talk about. You mentioned in your news roundup the Women's World Tour race, Japan and Gent-Wevelgem. I spoke to Lisa Brenner, who has been a great teammate for Kirsten Wield at WNT, and I spoke to Cecilia Uttrup-Ludwig at the end of Gent-Wevelgem. She's looked really good as well so far this year. And you'll hear those interviews in the next episode of the cycling podcast Femina, which will come from the Tour of Flanders. So that will be available next week. I mentioned the Friends special that we've just released. That has come before the Patrick Lefevre special, which is coming out, I think, just after Flanders now.
Yeah, be coming out between Flanders and Roubaix, and unless otherwise...
Work continues on the Patrick Lefevre special, but really looking forward to listening to that. That's for friends of the podcast at thecyclingpodcast.com. Sign up if you haven't already. Thanks if you have. We should mention the Adam Blythe interviews. Last week's was with Luke Rowe. Some interesting little tidbits in there. This week's, which will come out at the end of the week, is with Tim Harris, who some of you may be familiar with, but Tim is a former professional rider, former British champion, rode for Rally Banana, Festina, and he's a very interesting figure in cycling, lives in Belgium, has looked after lots of riders over the years, including Adam Blythe. And so it's an interesting chat between them because they know each other extremely well. So that's coming out later this week, the Adam Blythe interview.
Busy old time, isn't it?
Busy time. That's all for this week, though. Thank you very much, Lionel.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, chaps.
Before we go, Rich, if anyone's watching the Tour of Flanders on Sunday or following it while out on the move and they want to follow the Telegraph's live blog by our colleague John McCleary, I can recommend it's a good way to keep up with the race, entertaining and informative.
Telegraph.co.uk for that. And before we go, we want to say thanks to some of our recent friends of the podcast, those of you who've signed up as friends of the podcast. The first two names, please, Daniel.
Colin McCloskey and Mincy Maxim.
Thank you very much to them. And Lionel?
A big thank you to Peter Darch, Dean Spencer and Keith Prothero.
And also to Jeremiah Neves and Manuel Untalan.
You've been listening to The Cycling Podcast. Subscribe to our newsletter at thecyclingpodcast.com to get all the latest news and special offers delivered straight to your inbox. This episode was edited and produced by Tom Wally.